afternoon. Welcome to The Journey is Real. I'm CJ Peterson, where we talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their heart. Today, my guest is Alpert. She is talking about her journey as from the mother's perspective of when her daughter went through a heroin addiction. I did a little research. Some of the statistics I found were completely and utterly staggering. So give me just a second. I want to go ahead and read through those real quick. Almost 21 million Americans have at least one addiction, yet only 10% of them receive treatment. Drug overdose deaths have more than tripled since 1990. From 1999 to 2017, more than 700,000 Americans died from overdosing on a drug. About 494,000 Americans over the age of 12 are regular heroin users. In 2017, 886,000 Americans used heroin at least once. About 25% of people who try heroin will become addicted. In 2017, 81,000 Americans tried heroin for the first time. Over 15,000 Americans died from a heroin overdose in 2017 alone. To me, those statistics are just mind-blowing. I do understand that you are a mother of 8, so congratulations and God bless you. Welcome to the show. The one we're particularly interested in talking to you about, though, is regarding your story about your daughter. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that with us?
Sure. I guess the best place to start is that in December of 2017, I woke up to a CNN story featuring my daughter, pregnant, shooting up heroin in an alley and being confronted by an Albuquerque policeman.
Whoa.
Who ultimately offered to adopt her baby. I knew my daughter was a heroin addict. She'd been a heroin addict off and on since 2013. I knew she was pregnant, and I knew she was living on the streets. But I hadn't seen her since 2015, and just the shock and the visual of just seeing her move and her body and her speak was overwhelming to me. I immediately started trying to save the story because I'm so tech savvy. I didn't understand that it would be everywhere forever on the internet. It went viral. It was picked up by multiple news agencies. There were 2 more CNN stories. She was on the policeman showed up on the Today Show holding up the baby with his wife. And eventually he would be Trump's guest at the State of the Union, where they would show the baby to the world.
That's kind of a heartbreaking way to find out.
Yeah, I handled it really well. I got so angry, I thought I might punch holes in walls. Yeah, up until that time, I had been doing what most parents of heroin addicts do, and meth. I've been isolating, keeping it to myself. People weren't talking about heroin, and really they still aren't. I mean, the media talks about heroin, but parents don't talk about what they're going through with their own children. There's still a pretty major stigma around heroin use, especially when it's needles, once you move to needles. And my daughter went to needles very quickly.
A lot of times people try to put this face up or this mask up, that everything is fine, everything is perfectly fine, we're the perfect American family. I mean, especially in this day and age with social media, they don't want people to see that, you know, there is somebody hurting back here and I need help.
Right. And the thing is, it's that, and it's also that people are so judgmental. I mean, when you tell someone your daughter's a heroin addict, they look at you a little scary. When you tell them you're letting your daughter live on the streets, they look at you like you're a monster. And so most of us keep our feelings to ourselves. And I had gotten really good at compartmentalizing my heroin addict. I kept her in this box. And when she got out, I would have a really bad day and I would apologize to people. You know, you don't want to make other people uncomfortable. But the silliness of life, it all seemed when you're standing there and you don't know if your child is alive or dead, the silliness of most people's lives drive you crazy, and you're just better off not participating.
Right.
So I had stopped participating. I was working out a lot. The gym was a great place I could go and be with people without being with people. My friends were audiobooks. And I had just pulled back. And when the story broke, I think I went into free fall. My phone started ringing. I had been keeping this pretty secret, but all of a sudden, her face, her name, it was all out there. Like you said, I'm the mother of 8 children. 6 I gave birth to, 1 I picked up in marriage. Crystal, I am her 3rd mother. She was put up for adoption at birth. And then those parents handed her over to me just before she turned 16. When she started using, she was 30. And when I first got a call from her boyfriend in 2013 telling me that if I didn't come to Santa Fe, she would die, I was caught completely off guard. I had no idea. I'd seen her a few months before. I saw no signs. In retrospect, maybe there were signs. She never had any money, and they were both working. But I was really caught off guard. But what made it worse was that he would call me and tell me she was going to die. And then I would talk to her and she'd sound completely normal and say, he's overreacting. And that's really before I knew how completely normal a heroin addict sounds when they're high. It's only when they're coming off the drugs that it's really bad. So, I had already gone through 2013 driving to Santa Fe with my oldest son, pulling her off the floor, where she looked significantly worse than she did in 2017 when the story broke on CNN. She looked pretty good then. I like to say she was a better addict. She'd been at it for a while. When I pulled her off the floor in 2013, she weighed 92 pounds.
Wow.
She had sores on her body. My son and I broke into her house, found her in a back room, shook her awake. And she opened her eyes and looked at me and said, I knew you'd come. And it was horrible. And she had been shooting up not just in her arms, but between her fingers and her toes and then into her neck.
Wow.
And so she looked horrible. And we convinced her to go to detox. Getting a child into detox and rehab is challenging. I don't know how an addict is expected to do it on their own. There's lots of paperwork. There's lots of medical tests. You have to pick up medications and arrive. But what people don't understand is detox is 7 days, just 7 days. And that's to get over the worst of the addiction.
That's all that they're in for?
7 days. That's all detox is. Then you hope to get into a longer term rehab facility. And if you happen to have $100,000 to $200,000, you can do that. But for middle class and poor, there are no beds. Beds are hard to get. So after detox, she lived with me in Dallas for a month, 6 weeks before she was able to get a bed in a facility. Heroin's not a 30-day fix. Even if you happen to have insurance, once they're over that age where you can cover them on your insurance, heroin addicts do not pay their insurance premiums. So you're looking for free beds, and there aren't very many.
Right.
She was there. She was at her first rehab for 2.5 months. When she got out of rehab, she would not go to a halfway house. She immediately went back to her boyfriend, happily ever after, we're all going to be great. And then she decided the way to stay sober was to get pregnant. And so I didn't want to tell her children, make you drink. They basically, she got pregnant. And then there was nothing to do. And so we all sort of put it on the back burner. She had a beautiful baby. And then when that child was about a little over a year, she spun out again. And I know in retrospect that she had an emergency C-section. And I'm pretty sure they gave her opioids at that point, and she was never
completely her back on to the cycle. And
yeah, the whole medical thing that we don't pay attention to. And she spun out at that point bad, was staying out all night, selling everything that wasn't nailed down to buy drugs. And we convinced her to go back to detox again.
Mm-hmm.
But that time when she got out, she didn't last 2-3 weeks. And then she was using heavily again. She was back to the needle.
So what happened with her first child? Was the child sent into social services?
No, no. That was a big fight. I really didn't want this child to end up in Child Protective Services. And her father had gotten clean. And so he took the child and moved to Texas close to his mother. And I'll always respect him for doing that and for saving that child. She's wonderful. But Crystal, we left. I think that it was a point where I had to choose between my daughter and my granddaughter. And Crystal was spinning out, and we needed to save her child. So we brought Sage to Texas, where she, she is still here, I think. Crystal, then eventually we had to let her go. We couldn't pay for an apartment. It would have just become a place for her to hang out with her drug friends. Jim left her with a car. He packed it with warm clothes and left her in Santa Fe, and then she eventually got to Albuquerque. For the next 2.5 years, she lived on the streets. I really thought if I let her live on the streets, that she would want to come back because, excuse me, she would miss things like beds and showers. But there's also a really free life in living on the streets. You don't have to take care of anybody. You don't have to make any money. You have no responsibility. You're literally standing on a corner waving a flag till somebody gives you enough money to get high that day. And Crystal at one point she lived under a bridge, which no one understands, that bridges have a little space between the bottom and the highway. Mm-hmm. And they would go up in there and form these little houses. And she lived there until the police, kicked them out and took everything. She eventually took up with a guy named Tom, and they lived together, and they lived in a tent in the park or stayed with friends sometimes. I kept in touch with her through phones. I would send her phones. I probably sent her 10 phones while she was living on the streets. And so when I wrote my book, a good portion of it is text messages between me and Crystal. Sometimes they're long. Sometimes they're just HH when she's high and would text me at 2 or 3 in the morning. Those were the rough years. Those were the years where I never knew if she was alive.
So during all this time, I can't imagine what you were feeling as a mom.
You don't know if they're alive or dead. You plan their funerals over and over. I called the morgue once. I would stay up at night looking at websites of people, lost people. There's tons of them with facial recognitions and drawings where you can just go pages, pages. You go down some scary rabbit holes because you've lost control and you really have no place to land. And I think that when the CNN story broke, I like to say that I had been praying and praying because I'm a Jesus girl. So I've been praying for Crystal's recovery. Mm-hmm. And in the end, God gave me exactly what I had been praying for. It just didn't involve a policeman. My prayers didn't include the policeman, CNN, and an interventionist from Florida. The good news was Crystal got free rehab to the tune of about $100,000 to $200,000.
Wow.
She stayed 6 months in the rehab.
And that got her where she needs to be now?
She's now been clean 2.5 years.
Oh, awesome.
So that's the good part. I think for me, the rough part was that when I sat down to write a book, I didn't intend to write a book. I was just trying to get a chronological ordering of everything that had happened. I discovered all these text messages, and I had jail records, and I had medical forms, and I wanted to get a story together and help me find my footing. I was just so angry, and it made no sense to me why I was so angry. Mm-hmm. And so in the writing, I was able to sort of find myself again. And I realized that so much of my anger was just about my own ego, that I had been saving this child since she was 16 years old. I was her savior. And I think, I like to say in about 2 seconds, this policeman, was her savior. I had my wings cut and was tossed off the cloud in about 2 seconds for this new savior who was now the one who helped her.
But in reality, it wasn't either one of you that actually saved her.
No, Crystal was on her own journey. Crystal needed to save herself. Mm-hmm. And so I think now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do a couple of things. I'm trying to raise awareness for heroin addiction and for the parents. After I wrote this book, I sent it to Crystal, and
Mhm.
she was the first one to say, you need to publish this book
Oh,
because number one, I filled in all her gaps. She used to say to me, I don't remember. And I would say, well, I remember everything. And so,
mhm.
you know, but more than that, she said, I have a perspective that very few parents get to tell. My daughter's alive.
Mhm.
That's a miracle. There's no reason why Crystal lived when so many others died. It was a truly miracle series of events. You had a reporter from Dallas, a policeman from Albuquerque, and an interventionist from Florida who all ended up in the same spot to save this child. And most parents don't get that. Their children die. And when they die, they lose their fight and they're just too broken. And we're in a society where we need to honestly be raging against the fact. I mean, you read the statistics of how many people we're losing every day to these addictions.
Mhm.
But it's going to take money and science and beds and compassion in
And
order
usually
for,
at that point, um, a lot of people end up being addicted to whatever it is they're addicted to because they're trying to escape wherever they are and they can't because they don't have the money to do so. And they don't have the money to battle it.
if your child comes to you and says, I want to get clean, and you don't have $100,000, there's very limited resources of where they can go. And they try to give them 30 days, and that's not going to do it. And
Mm.
so it's a long program, and it's something that we're going to have to. I like to say AIDS was an out of control illness till so many people died that society stood up and demanded change. And I feel that way about the opioid crisis.
Mhm.
People need to stand up and change,
Right.
demand change from the government, from the medical system. And as people, no one's going to be left untouched by this. So the judgy people who are like, ooh, your child has a needle in their arm. This disease is everywhere now. I mean, in 2013, when Crystal started using, it wasn't out there like it is now. And I had no idea what heroin looked like. I didn't know anything about it.
Mhm.
I had warned, I like to say as parents, we warn our children. We tell them not to get in the car with strangers, not to drink and drive. We teach them about, sex and all the other things. Heroin was not on my radar. It was not something I taught my children or even raised an awareness about to them. It just was not, it wasn't in the cards at that time. But now we know it is, and we know it is everywhere.
Mhm.
So I hope that I can keep another parent from hiding and isolating. We need to become compassionate listeners so these people are able to talk about what they're going through.
Mhm.
Heroin isn't a short fix, it's a long journey. And I am even with Crystal, she's been clean 2.5 years. But I have a friend whose son's been clean 12 years and just relapsed. So, and you see it in the media all the time that someone's been clean for 30 years, 25 years, and they relapse.
Mhm.
Parents and loved ones have to take care of themselves as well. They have to accept that this journey that your addict is on is your addict's journey. I told a woman that my child was doing heroin one day, and she said, "Oh, you must feel awful." And I said, "I feel awful. She's a heroin addict, but I didn't put the needle in her arm. She did,
It's a
and she
choice
has
that
to make
they're
it.
making, and it's a choice that they need to make to get out of it.
Yeah, she has to make the decision to
Mhm.
take the needle out of her arm. I can't make that for her. I can love her. I can listen to her. The whole time she was on the street, when I went through all of our text messages, most of them are me trying to find her. You know, where are you? I love you. Please go to rehab. Just one after the other. But you're still staying in touch. I never gave her money when she was on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
I gave her phones.
Mm-hmm.
I occasionally put her up in a hotel when it was super cold outside.
Mm-hmm.
But I never gave her money because money to a using addict isn't the solution.
No, that's fuel to the fire.
Yeah, fuel. And parents go through their savings, they go through multiple fortunes trying to save their children when their children aren't really ready or open to getting clean.
Now, this book that you published, it's called "Surrender: A Love Letter from My Daughter, or for my daughter."
It's called Surrender, a love letter to my daughter.
A love letter to my daughter. She wanted you to publish that book. In writing that
Yes,
book, it gave you a bit of freedom. What other doors has it opened up for you in actually publishing the book?
it's just starting to open doors. I think I published the book and no one really, where I live, knew any of this was going on. So I had to go through the first sort of round of just the basic people knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think I'm beginning to step out. I'm starting to speak to groups about addiction. The best thing it did for me was I recognized I'm not a fixer. I've been a fixer and a controller my whole life. I grew up in addiction. That's what you do. You maintain control. You either become an addict or you're a codependent. And I was a great codependent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that I have retired from fixing, which all of my children are grateful for. And so, and it's incredibly freeing for me, not, to be able to recognize that I have 8 adult children and they're all on their own journeys and I can't fix any of them. They have to live their own lives now. And I think for me, I spend a lot of time in prayer and meditation. I spend quiet time.
Mm-hmm.
I know that this road for addiction, you have to take care of yourself when you're the parent. And I think that I've been able to talk to a lot of people. I've had so many people who've lost children call me, Facebook me, people who are in the midst of it. I've sat with them and we've talked about letting go. And, so that's what I want to do now. I want to be able to reach out to people and talk to them.
Speaking of that, are there any stories that have stood out to you over the time since you've published the book that have you just kind of hold close to your heart and are like, I'm keeping this person in prayer because...
Yes, lots of them. But interestingly enough, I spoke Friday and an older woman came up to me afterwards and she said, my granddaughter is a meth addict. And she said, I just went to see her in rehab. And she said, I asked her, how are you doing? What step are you on? And she said, my granddaughter looked at me and said, Grammy, I think I'm still on step 1. I just love meth. And that's what I saw with Crystal. That's what I saw with Crystal. Crystal would say to me, I don't want to live in a world without heroin. And she told me once, the guy she was with said, I can't believe you won't quit for me. And she said, I won't quit for my daughter, her father, my mother, my siblings. You're way down the list of people I won't quit for.
Wow.
It's a strong drug. And I think that's the thing that our children don't understand. When you ask children today why they're getting high or using drugs, it's not to get high and it's not to experiment. They're numbing. They're no different than their parents at the end of a hard week wanting to have a couple of stiff drinks to take the edge off.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids are overscheduled, overscreened, and they don't know how to be quiet with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they're numbing.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's starting.
Yeah, when they're raised on the iPad or the television, they're used to, we've kind of formulated an almost instant gratification society. And
yes.
So when they're stuck in front of something and they don't know where to go, what do? They don't know how to just be still.
Yes, we haven't taught them to cope and we haven't given them coping skills.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is these kids, their brains aren't mature enough to understand that when you touch a drug like heroin, that death could be just around the corner, and death is permanent. And they don't understand the permanence of death yet.
No, because they see on TV that somebody dies and, oh, they're back the next week, or they're in a different show. And to them, they didn't really die. And they don't understand that two things: death is permanent, and it may be an escape for them, but they're leaving a huge mess for everybody else that loves them.
Yeah, I've had a lot of suicide in my life as well. And there used to be a saying that everyone has skeletons, but people who commit suicide leave their skeletons in other people's closets. Addicts do the same thing. Addicts are the walking dead, and they leave their skeletons for their loved ones. The loved ones carry the guilt and the shame and the sadness and the horror that they can't save them. And so the addicts are out there walking, they're high, they're doing, it's party time, but it's the loved ones who really are carrying the brunt. They're raising the children of the addicts.
Well, we have just a few more minutes. Is there anything that you would like to add?
I think if I could give words, it would be to parents who have addicts and to people raising children. Be honest, talk about these things. If you are a parent in the midst of addiction with a child or a loved one of any kind, don't isolate, reach out. Take some steps to take care of yourself. You can't do it alone. And if you do it alone, you're just going crazy in your own way. And I think that's what I did.
Are there a list of resources on your website at all for people that find themselves in this position?
Yes, my website has blog posts, list of resources that people can use.
What is that website?
The website is loualpertbooks.com.
Okay, can you spell that out?
LOUALPERTBOOKS.com.
Perfect. So anybody who's going through that type of a situation, you can reach out to Lou, or you can even go onto her website and find the resources that you need. There is help out there. There is hope out there.
Yes.
Lou, thank you so much for sharing your heart.
Thank you for having me.
Kind of breaks my heart, but
I know it's hard. It's hard.
So, okay. Thank you so much for joining Journey is Real, where there are real people sharing their real passions and a portion of their heart. And thank you, Lou, for joining us today. Goodbye until next time.